it's all positive, but it makes you dependent on me. It makes little praise junkies. If they depend on me, they're going to depend on other adults. And guess what? Their soccer coach might be the one who screams at them and tells them, "You're the slowest kid out here. I can't believe you don't have." If they trusted my judgment of them, they're going to trust his the same way. So it's all about not putting your self-esteem out there and feeling powerless. It's about knowing when you've done good for yourself and building that forward. You guys are excited very much. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Questions? Anything? Has anything come up with praise or encouragement that you can think of at the moment?
So, praise is more general and encouragement is more specific. So
Absolutely. It's one of the big factors, yes.
So saying exactly what they did good.
Yes, and noticing. Thanks for gathering up the rakes as we go back inside instead of, "Good job, everybody, on cleanup today."
Okay.
Right? Thank you, Morgan, for bringing the rakes. Or, I noticed you picked up all the seed packets and put them back in the wheelbarrow. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Trying to think of something that's more applicable to your setting. And it just makes people feel noticed as individuals, and again, builds that relationship of bond. People like to hear their names, right? So you say, "I noticed you by name," and then something specific that they did. You're not just a part of the herd or a part of the group, but you're a person and they're a person. You have that interaction. I want to wait and give you time, but not wait too long and use our time. So it's okay to speak up. We do things very informally.
Another thing that we don't do is this idea of rewards and punishment. So they both stem from this idea of behavioral theory, which is more focusing on controlling the behavior of the child or manipulating it instead of actually teaching the child what you want them to do and the behavior that you want them to have. So you basically punish them in order to reduce a certain behavior, or you reward them to increase the behavior happening. And so an example for that is to give a child a sticker for picking up after themselves or finishing all their homework or whatever you want to think about. So the problem with that is that you're attaching a certain behavior to just an action. It's not teaching them, right or wrong, or why they should be doing a certain thing. And punishments, they're used to eliminate or reduce the behavior. And so you give them the time out or send them to the principal for breaking some kind of property or hitting a classmate. Now, this really reminds me of animal training. So, you have your dog and you give him a treat if they do something correctly, if they, ring the bell to go potty outside, or if they, do a certain trick. Or you punish them by putting them in their crate if they bark too loudly, or if they don't come when you tell them to come. So what we do instead is this idea of consequences, natural and logical consequences. And this is based on more cognitive and social cultural theories. So we use natural consequences to teach them what's appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior. And it's meant to shape their behavior, so we model behavior that we want for them to do. And we anticipate behavior and change the environment around the children and ourselves to reduce any kind of problem. So this is more known as indirect guidance, and you set up the classroom in a way where if you can think about, there's only 10 rakes and we have 30 children, maybe not going to work because that's going to create a huge problem with sharing. So maybe you need to put out 10 rakes and 10 shovels and 10 something else so other children have something to play with too. So it's just basically trying to set up your environment in a way that reduces problems and reduces conflict. So the natural consequences, it's basically an outcome that happens as a result of behaviors that are not planned or not controlled by anyone. So an example is that, it's freezing outside and
This
the
is
child...
on page 3 for you guys.
Yes, thank you. And the child decides not to wear his jacket because he or she doesn't want to wear it. But then, even though the teacher reminds them it might be cold if you don't wear your jacket, and 5 minutes later the child comes and says, I'm really cold. It's a natural consequence of not wearing your jacket, you will get cold. Same with, if you're outside gardening and it might be sprinkling and you might be encouraging children to wear their rain jackets and they choose not to, the natural consequence is that they'll be wet. So, any questions about that? And then the logical consequence is basically they do not occur naturally as a result of behavior, but are intentionally planned by teachers. So as teachers, we expect and teach them acceptable behavior and let them know and point out to them what their consequences are if they do not follow the rules or follow the limits that we set. For example, if you have your group of children and before you even hand out any gardening tools or any tools that you're going to work with them, you set up specific limits for them to work with. So you say we have these tools and they're just for digging and moving around the dirt. If I see you, keep the dirt in the shovel, keep the shovels in the dirt and off the children's bodies. And if I see you, using it on any other children, I'm going to take it away from you, and I'm going to ask you, or I'm going to give you another job. So there's very specific limits. It's the shovel or the diggers, or they're just for digging the dirt, or it's just for the watering cans, just for watering the plants. And if you can't follow these rules, then the logical consequence is that you lose your privilege to be here and dig and water the plants, and instead you have to go do something else. And usually, you're supposed to use the child's strengths and think about their strengths when reassigning them a different project to work on. So if they end up hitting a child, you can think, okay, so you've lost your privilege of being here, but instead you can go over and write, little labels for the plants because I know that you are good at writing. So it's really thinking about the individual child again and giving them various choices or reassigning them to something that we know that they're good at and that we know that they're going to succeed in. So there's 3 points or 3 things to remember about logical consequences. This is on page 4. And the first is that it has to be related. The consequence has to be related to the actual student behavior. So for example, if a child uses a gardening tool as a weapon, and because he didn't use the tool for digging, they lose the ability to use the shovel. So that's an appropriate consequence, is to take away the shovel and give them 2 or 3 different alternative choices. But an inappropriate, is to, for example, make them run 10 laps for hitting another child because it's not related to anything that they did wrong. The second one is that the teacher should be respectful and should be empathetic and talk in a respectful tone when redirecting the child, because otherwise the child will get its own feelings hurt, or he or she will become aggressive and passive, or just feel disrespected and won't take the teacher serious at all. And the last one is that the limit should be reasonable. So again, when you want to redirect their behavior and give them a consequence for the inappropriate behavior, it shouldn't be too severe or too cruel or demeaning in any way. So, you can take the shovel away for the rest of the afternoon and allow them to do a different job somewhere else. But it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate, and it would be a little bit too severe to say you can't have the shovel for the rest of the month or the rest of the week, because it's too severe for what the child did. And you want to keep giving the children chances to basically act appropriately and follow the limits, and give them that chance again and again to try to follow the rules. So there's a chart on page 11. That on the left